Hi there, this is Heather of Shutterbug 101. Today we'll be exploring the Canon T7i with the 18 to 55 kit lens, aperture 3.5 to 5.6. This 24 megapixel camera is a crop sensor and lightweight, perfect for beginners and hobbyists looking for something easy that still provides great quality images. The T7 and T7i are nearly the same except for a few key details. The T7i has a fully articulating screen while the T7 screen is fixed flat to the back. The T7i also has a faster processor than the T7. It is better in low light as the ISO offered is higher and has 45 autofocus points rather than the T7's 9. The T7i also has a faster continuous drive at 6 frames per second versus the 3 on the T7. It has more video options, and while the T7i has a microphone port, the T7 does not. That being said on differences, we're mainly focusing on the T7i in this video. However, you will find that a lot of the buttons and menus will be the same. This walkthrough is to explore all the different buttons and doors and menus, explaining their purpose and what you would use them for. So today we're going to start with the front. I'm going to start with this button here, which this button is just going to be used to remove the lens from the actual body. So you push down, you turn to the side here, comes right off. Now something to remember here is that when you're changing your lens on any camera, you want to make sure that you be very, very quick about putting a lens back on. Because essentially, behind this mirror, behind this shutter, is going to be the heart of your camera. So if any dirt, debris, anything gets in there, it can permanently damage your camera. So it's very important that you keep your camera down or to the side when changing lenses. Never store it upward. To put a lens back on, you're either going to see a white square or a red dot. Here on the top of the lens, you're going to see where you're going to line those up. So white square to white square. You'll click until it clicks. Okay. Here we can see that it is indeed the Rebel T7i that we're looking for. That's where you're going to find your model. On the lens itself, now this can vary between different lenses. On our kit lens, however, you will find two different switches. You have your AF and MF. What that's going to stand for is autofocus and manual focus. Okay, so if you're in a situation where you're trying to take a close-up of a flower and it's just not focusing where you want it to focus, what you're going to do is you're going to switch that switch over to manual focus, and this is going to be your focus ring. You'll have full control over where you want your focus to be. Autofocus is just going to allow it to pick a focus wherever it thinks is fit. Like, oh, that's where you want to focus at. Okay. Here we have a stabilizer in the lens. What this allows is it compensates for typical body shake, because as still as you think you are, there is blood running through your body that does cause your body to have a little shake. So in tough lighting conditions, that sort of thing, the stabilization will help with that. Now, if you're ever on a tripod, you're doing a long exposure, you're trying to get a group family shot, you want to make sure that the stabilizer is then turned off, because at that point, you're letting the tripod stabilize your camera. This is only going to be for handheld situations. Moving to the side of our camera here, you're going to see that there's a little door here. It does say card open, so as you can guess, there is a little SD card in there. Now this is spring loaded, so make sure that you push down to pull out, okay? On the door here, it does show a little diagram of how you will put your SD card in. On every card, there is a little slant on the side. There it is on this card here. So at this point, you're going to make sure that the pictures match, which is just like this. Putting the card in, pushing down so it does spring back into place. On the other side here, we're going to see some ports. So here it's pretty well descripted. On this door, we're going to see a assigned for a remote control. Now this can be handy in situations where you're doing a long exposure, you don't want any shake to the camera. You can also connect your phone wirelessly to your camera here. It does have a wireless remote function. However, on the T7i currently, as of today, it does not do any live mode for you to see. It just uses it as a remote. You do have a spot for a microphone, so if you were to do any video and you want better microphone than these little dots here, which is actually the built-in microphone for this camera, you can do that. Here we have an HDMI port. That's going to allow you to plug your camera directly into your television set. Maybe share some vacation photos that you've taken with a group of people. You also have a USB port here as well underneath this door, which will allow you to connect your camera directly to your computer. Now, a lot of people do this to transfer images from their card to their computer. This is possible. I do find that it's easier on a Windows computer, as Apple tends to reject some firmware from cameras. So if you do have an Apple computer, you may want to consider getting a card reader. It's just going to be a little insert that you plug into a USB port, put the card into, and it should be able to save all your pictures. So if this plug doesn't work here, a card reader does just as well. Going to the bottom of the camera, this is going to be able to show the battery compartment, so the battery door. So when you open up this battery door here, you see that there is a little switch. When you open up this switch here, it allows you to pull the battery right out. This is a rechargeable battery. When you do buy this camera, it does come with a charger. If you ever lose one, they are available for purchase separately, which is good. You just put it back in there, close the door, and you're ready to go. Now this screw at the bottom here, this is going to be a universal screw mount for any tripod. It's going to be the same on every camera. So this is actually where you would screw your plate into to mount it on a tripod or even a Gorilla Pod. Going to the top of the camera here. All right, we're going to see some symbols, some numbers that may not seem familiar. We'll kind of go over those just a little bit. So kind of starting with this here, what this is actually going to be a hot shoe mount. So this will allow you to attach an off-camera flash onto your camera. I gotta admit, you'll probably hear me say it through several videos, that every pop-up flash like this guy here, which I'll demonstrate in just a moment, all of these pop-up flashes are awful. It does a good job if you're in an emergency and you absolutely need the light. Otherwise, it's always better getting an on-camera flash, because an on-camera flash will allow you to tilt the head, bounce off of walls and ceilings. It just looks a lot more natural, especially with the diffuser. So I recommend getting one of these. If you do find that you are doing a lot of portrait photography, event photography, a flash is absolutely necessary. This guy won't work right here. Again, I'll demonstrate this guy in just a moment. Going on to our dial here, I'm going to kind of raise the camera up. So our green dial is actually going to stand for auto. Auto is going to let the camera take full control over what you're taking pictures of. Whatever it meters for, whatever it autofocuses on, you're just letting the camera decide everything. Now, hopefully, after getting this camera, there's nothing wrong with being on auto. However, you know, you got an interchangeable lens camera for a reason, to move forward with photography. So I do urge you to attend a photo class, to maybe try your P mode, which is what we'll go over here in just a moment. That will allow you to really make the most out of your purchase. Now, if we go to P mode here, okay, you'll notice that the P, TV, and AV and M are all going to be in a bracket. Those are going to be your manual modes. So in your manual modes, the P mode is going to stand for program. Your program mode is going to be your first step off of auto. That's going to allow you to change certain features, certain autofocuses. On some cameras like this one, it'll allow you to change your aperture or shutter speed, and it will compensate for other things to make sure you still get a well exposed photo. Okay, your TV mode is going to stand for time value. Time value is going to be shutter speed. That's going to control either stopping motion or showing motion. So in a situation where you're at a baseball game, you want to catch the baseball being hit right from the bat, you'll want a faster number. Or say you come across a waterfall and you want to blur that water that's going over the waterfall showing motion. You'll want to take a slower shutter speed. It's the amount of time that the light enters the camera. AV is going to be aperture variable. This is going to control the opening in your lens. Aperture is like the pupil of your eye. When you're in a dark room, you may find that your pupils get very large because it needs to let in as much light as possible because there's not much light available. But in the bright sunlight, our pupils may be very small because there's plenty of light to go around. The aperture on your camera works just the same. Now, when you change your speed on TV or you change your aperture in AV, the camera is going to decide vice versa to work with what your choice is. So you need to decide is what your goal is when you take pictures, because an aperture will also give you your depth of field. A smaller number aperture or a wider opening, now this gets very confusing, will get you that nice blurry background, which you're kind of seeing here beyond the camera, because this lens that I'm taking this video with is a 2.8, lower number, larger opening, and sharp foreground. While a larger number like f/22, for example, will actually be able to get us a sharp background and sharp foreground overall. So something to definitely keep in mind. So if you are trying to stop motion, show motion, or you're taking portrait photography and you want that nice blurry background, that's going to judge what mode you're going to have it on. Now we'll move on to our M mode here, which is going to be full manual. Now, if you're just purchasing this camera, you're getting out of point and shoot, you're getting out of cell phone photography, you're wanting to learn more, stay away from your manual for now, okay? Do not let the manual setting determine that you're a professional photographer, because that's not how it works. Don't let anyone tell you just because you're not taking it on M means that you're not a photographer. It's complete bullcrap. I can't stand when people get turned away from photography because someone is discouraged because they're doing it wrong. There's no such thing as doing photography wrong, because photography is an art. I'm getting a little preachy here, but I feel very strongly about this. Now, manual mode is definitely going to get you the ultimate exposure because you have full control. Now, you do have to understand your shutter speed, your aperture, all of these things before going into manual mode, or else it's just going to be very frustrating and confusing. So just know that's what M means, not movie, it's manual. And I don't expect any of you to get there right away, but we will touch on that in later videos. So some of these other modes here, you'll see that these two circles are kind of colliding into each other on this mode. That is actually going to be a creative filter mode. This is the mode that you'll be able to take pictures in black and white, sepia, kind of an old-timey. It's just different filters, very similar to what you'll see on Instagram. We have a scene mode, which is essentially going to be these other pictures here as well, the face, the mountains, the flower, the running person, and then more on scene. So these scene modes are actually going to be auto presets. So they're very similar to your auto mode. What it's going to allow you to do is the face, of course, is going to be for portrait photography. The mountains are going to be for landscapes. The flower is going to be for macro photography. The running man is going to be for sports. And your scene mode will actually allow you to do multiple other things like nighttime photography, you know, food photography. It has very specific little dials there. So it's definitely something to play with. It's not something I would depend on, like, oh shoot, I was just taking a picture of a person, but now I'm taking a picture of flowers. I have to put it on my macro mode. Not necessary, but if you have the time to switch it over to the mode, absolutely. If not, and you're still learning about your camera, just stay in auto, because auto is going to do a judge over all of it. But I do find that a lot of people that have come to me and learning about their camera, if they know someone that does sports, anything like that, the sports mode does a wonderful job helping them learn. So definitely, you know, use these when you get the chance, but don't lean on them directly. Your CA is going to be your creative dial here, which will allow you to adjust specific colors, saturation. It's another way to get black and white, that sort of thing there. Nothing I would get too far into, but it is there on your dial to play with. You, of course, have a little lightning bolt that is crossed out. That's going to be your auto no flash. However, I personally, if you're taking pictures on auto, which you probably are if you're starting out with this camera here, you'll notice that if you go and take a picture on auto, you may find that if we turn this on here, we go and we take a picture, that flash is going to pop up whenever it feels like it. It goes, oh, well, I think it's a little too dark. This is going to pop up. For me, that's a little frustrating. I don't want it to pop up on its own. So instead of putting it in the no flash auto mode, I would actually switch it over to P, because P is essentially going to be your auto mode, give you a little bit more control, but it won't automatically pop up that flash unless you push your flash button, which on this camera is actually going to be, let's see, right over here. So the little lightning bolt here will allow that to pop on up. So getting to the rest of the front of the camera. Here we go. So this, of course, is going to be your picture taking button. You're going to push halfway down to focus. You're going to press completely to take the picture. This is going to be your adjustment wheel here. This will allow you to change, if you're on your TV mode, it'll allow you to change your shutter speed. AV mode will allow you to change your aperture. What this button allows is when we push that on our back screen here, it allows us to select our autofocus selection. So this is going to be considering the whole image. This is going to be certain zones, so left, center, right. This is going to be certain points in a selection mode. And then of course you have your center autofocus, which is just one point. So depending on what you choose, that's where it's going to take its focus from when you're taking your picture. Now our ISO mode, that's going to be your photosensitivity. So when we take this, so when we push our ISO, this will allow us to use our adjustment dial right here. That'll allow us to go from 100 to 25,600, or just stay on auto. Now ISO is going to be your sensitivity to light. On days where it's really, really bright outside, it's actually going to be ISO 100 to 200. When you're in a dim restaurant where you're taking pictures of your family eating at the table, that's when you want your ISO to be a little bit higher, probably about 6400. You don't really want to go up to the 25,000 mark because that's when you start getting noisy pictures, and we'll go into that in a beginner photography video later on. Now, we're also changing the display, which is just going to be turning the display on, turning the display off with this display button. Okay, this switch here, of course, on, off, when you switch it all the way up is going to actually be your video mode. That's going to give you a live view mode on the back of your screen here. To start recording is actually going to be this camera button next to the red dot. So it's going to be start recording, stop recording. Very simple there. To get back to taking pictures, you're going to put that down to the on mode, where here it's just going to be giving you your regular display. This, of course, is going to be a level, so when it's nice and green, that's going to be right where it's going to be nice and straight. You can also change the info on the back screen here. This is going to be the default of the T7i, where it tells you about your mode, what you can control, what your focus is. Now this is touchscreen as well, so if we were to adjust this and we were to go over to our Q or our quick menu, this allows us to change our focus area, to take single or continuous photos, or a timer, or use a change our focus method. You can use the Q button here, or you can use the Q button here as well. We'll get into that in just a moment. You'll see a little magnifying glass here, one with a plus and one with a minus. So these allow you to zoom in on your photo after you press play, which is going to be this button down here. It's going to be the triangle in the box. When you push that, that allows you to bring up photos that you've taken pictures of, which you can scroll through left and right. So here, if we wanted to make sure that that butterfly is in focus, you can push the zoom in, and that'll allow you to zoom in there. That'll allow you to, focus more right in on the butterfly there. You can really focus in. If you want to zoom back out, naturally is going to be the magnifying glass with the minus. Okay. So if you were taking pictures, gets back to picture taking mode. Another little tip and trick is when you're somewhere stuck in your menu or on some place that you don't want to be on your screen, you're like, I just want to take more pictures. You can actually tap this button halfway down and it'll exit out of anything that you've put yourself into on the back screen. Now here, if we push this button, that in video recording, when you push it, it's actually recording video. This will allow you to have a live view mode. So if we push that, that's going to allow us to get a live view mode on the front here, which is going to be very similar to what a mirrorless camera offers, but it isn't exactly what you see. So what you see is not how it's going to come out exactly, but it gives you a better sense than your viewfinder here. So that is an option, but it does eat away battery naturally because it's giving a constant feed to this back screen. So do be aware of that. We do have this flip out screen that does allow us to completely flip it around here. It allows us to also come back here and protect our screen when we're all done and ready to put it away. So it does help protect that sensitive screen area. Let's see. What else we have here is actually going to be, if you see here, we have a plus or minus mode. There is an AV here, which just indicates that it recommends that you put it into your AV mode using your dial before using this plus or minus feature. Now what this allows you to do is, without changing any other settings, if you wanted your scene to be a little bit brighter, a little bit darker, all you have to do is hold this button here. See, you have to hold this button and you're able to turn up the brightness, turn down the brightness. +1 is going to be brighter, -1 is going to be darker. So that is something to keep in mind when you are taking pictures. Now this is something that you're going to see a little bit better when you're doing it in live mode. So if you're adjusting it in live mode, you might be able to see here, it's making it darker versus making it lighter. Okay, so it's just a nice little shortcut. But if you have it in AV mode, at that point you're letting as much aperture as you can in, and if you need it to be brighter, using this setting here is going to be a nice little tool. So we'll put it off of live mode here. Like I said here, this is going to be our quick menu. So depending on what mode you have it on, It will depend on what you can change in the settings here. So if you hit your quick menu and you go through and you're like, oh, well, I want to take continuous photos, you can push the center button to choose that. You can do single shooting, high speed continuous, which of course on this camera is going to be 6 frames per second. You can do low speed continuous. You can use your remote, and you can set it to a timer in case you want to run and be in a group shot. Okay, we'll leave it on single mode for now, and that'll just allow us to choose those things. Here's going to be our Wi-Fi button, so you can connect it to your cellular device in case you wanted to transfer images to your cell phone from the camera. So if you're out on vacation, you take that once-in-a-lifetime image and you're like, oh, I have to share this with friends and family. You want to make sure that you can transfer it to your phone, share it on social media, and you don't have to wait till you get home to do so. What else we have here is going to be some shortcuts on the dial itself. So here is WB. What this is, it's going to be our white balance. In older cameras, you did have to change your white balance accordingly. So in some situations, it was like, oh, I'm going inside, I have to make it so it's, you know, indoors or cloudy or tungsten lighting. Cameras are extremely smart these days. So you will find that you rarely have to change it away from your auto white balance, which is the AWB. So it's not something I would play with a lot, but in situations where you want to get a little bit creative, get a little bit of a warmer photo or a cooler photo, depending on your situation, you could do that. But always remember to change it back, or else you're going to get blue or orange people in your photos and wonder what's going on. All right, so when you push on the right button where it says AF, which stands for autofocus, that's going to change your autofocus operation. This is going to give you 3 options. The first one's going to be one shot, which is going to be your autofocus single. That's going to allow you to focus in on a single subject that's not moving, like a still life or a person that's posing. It's going to pick a focus point, it's going to lock on and stay there until you take the photo. Al servo is going to be an autofocus continuous. That's going to allow you to take pictures of animals, people doing sports, where it's going to continually autofocus as the person or subject is moving. And then you have all focus, which is going to essentially be your autofocus auto. You're letting the camera decide in between whether the subject is moving or is still. So if you know for a fact that your subject is going to be still or moving, I recommend changing that. If not, you're walking around, you don't really know what to expect, you're on vacation, all focus does fine. But do keep that in mind that that is a feature for your camera. If we press the left button here where the multiple frames are, it's going to give us the same options as the quick menu, which just allows you to change the drive mode is what they call it. The single square, which is selected at the moment, allows you to take the picture, hold the button down, it's going to take one shot. If you go over to high speed continuous, when you hold your button down, it's going to take 6 frames per second as long as the button is held, and as long as you have a fast enough processing card. You also have the option to do a timer, and you also have the option to use your remote control if you buy that separately. Also, here, if we push down where this little wheel is, that's going to allow us to go into different picture styles. So I would personally keep it on auto, but it definitely does give you some options here. Monochrome faithful, which is a little bit more yellow, fine detail, landscape, portrait. It's essentially more auto pre-settings, but I would just keep it on auto and leave it at that. We already kind of went over the play button. Now in a situation where you press play and you don't want the picture anymore, you're going to push the trash can button, go over, and you're going to put erase. If you accidentally push it, just make sure that you go over and you push cancel. Okay, but that's how you're going to delete unwanted or blurry pictures right away. Now we're going to go ahead and get into the actual menu. So this does get a little confusing going through the menu here, but it is a fair layout, so it's not too bad. Again, we're dealing with touchscreen, so we can just go ahead and touch our shooting settings here. Shooting menu is going to be labeled red with the camera. That's going to allow you to change your image quality. which, going over image quality here, you do have the option of going JPEG or RAW. A JPEG image is going to be a compressed image that was edited in camera and is going to be ready to print. A RAW image will require a editing program that you'll need, whether it's Adobe or some other editing program that will work with RAW files. It will require editing before you can bring it into print. So that is extremely important to remember, because you can't just bring a RAW file anywhere and go, hey, can you print this for me? Because it is such a large file and it is unedited that they won't be able to do anything with it. So unless you have an editing program and you want to put the time into editing your photos, don't ever put it on RAW. Now, a RAW photo, you can actually take a very, very dark image that you took and bring it back to life by using sliders and editing tools. And because the image is so large, it doesn't look bad, which is great. You don't bring it any noise. You don't bring out any fuzziness. It doesn't look unclear. It doesn't look unnatural. So if you're taking pictures of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, it's definitely recommended that you go through and you take pictures on RAW. But again, you have to have a program to read those. You can change your image review for when you take the picture. It'll pop up for 2 seconds for you to take a look at, make sure how it came out. Here, you can release the shutter without a card. However, I personally would turn this off. I would disable that because if you're anything like me and you go out and you start taking pictures, I have a habit of forgetting a card, and I'll go through and go, oh, let me go back and see how those came out. And I'll press my play button and I'll go, oh, sorry, there's no card in there. So when you disable this, what it will tell you is when you go and you start taking pictures, it'll go, hold on, there's no card in there. I'm not going to take any pictures, which can save you a lot of time and disappointment if you do forget your card. Going back to shooting settings here, lens aberration correction. This will correct for the effects of lens optical characteristics on lenses, which just means that sometimes the glass on the lens can be a little bit orbed. This can cause sunspots, sun flares, color rings, that sort of thing. So this can help avoid that. Lens electronic manual focus. If it has an electronic focus ring, this can work. Nothing I would worry about too much here. Here you can control your exposure control, which again is just this button here. Your flash control in case you had an external flash. Red eye reduction in case you do use your pop-up flash to take pictures of friends and family. This can help reduce that red eye effect. Here you can choose your ISO speed. You can also choose the max when it is set to auto. So if you don't want your camera choosing between 100 and 25,000, you can actually set it to a max to go, okay, yeah, you can choose, but don't go above 6,400. This will allow you to change your metering mode as well. Now, metering mode is just where it's taking the light from. So when you're considering evaluative metering, it's taking kind of the balance of everything in the frame. Center weighted average is going to be whatever it finds in the center. Spot metering will allow you to, if you wanted the proper lighting, but you want to offset it to the left or right, to push your button halfway down to meter for the subject and then refocus on your frame, and it'll keep that metering there. And then you have your partial metering, which is just going to take a general zone of lighting from the photo there. Color space, you want to keep that on sRGB. That's going to be the most popular. You can change your picture style, your white balance, other things that we learned through our dial and our shortcuts on the menu here. Your long exposure noise reduction, I would definitely have that on. It can definitely help in those situations where you don't want very much noise. Anti-flicker shooting, if you do video, you may have come across a situation where you were doing video and you're getting a flicker in your video. And you may go, well, what the heck, what's that? Now, if you don't know, fluorescent lights tend to flicker depending on what frame rate you have set in your camera for video. Anti-flicker shooting will be able to help avoid some of that. Now, it's not foolproof naturally, but it does help. You can choose your aspect ratio. Our most popular is probably going to be 3:2 or 4:3, depending on what you want to do. And then, of course, live view shooting, which again is triggered by this button up here. It is enabled. Now, if we go back to the other menus, you just put menu again. We also have our playback settings. So if we click our playback settings here, this allows you to change any settings through the playback menu. So any pictures that you've already taken. So this will allow you to crop, resize, allow you to create a slideshow. This will be able to show you a histogram, which just shows the brightness and darkness spots of the picture if you would like it to. It also allows you to rotate images, erase images, and also print straight from the camera itself. I'm not saying that you'll use a lot of these, but just so you know what they are. Here, of course, you have your function settings. On our first one here, you can do file numbering, which is just going to name the different pictures as you continue to take photos. So whether it starts at 0001, it's just going to be a continuous number. You can also customize that as well in case you want it to be a specific number. You can do auto rotate, which is perfectly fine. So if you take your picture portrait versus landscape, it will be able to determine that. Format card. Now this is something that's extremely important and a lot of people don't know about. When you use your SD card and you take a lot of pictures, you go on vacation, you take your pictures, you go home, you store them on your computer. Make sure that they are backed up to your computer. Like when you take your card out, make sure that they are on your computer and that they're not still just on the card. After that, you want to reuse your SD card. Instead of deleting your images, re-putting them in the camera and taking more pictures, what you're going to want to do is actually go to the menu. You'll want to go to that function setting and you'll want to click Format Card. What Format Card means is it's essentially resetting it to the way that you purchased it. It is permanently deleting all photos currently on the card. When you do this, it's deleting everything. When you delete a photo, just with our little trash can here, what that does is it throws away what you're seeing, the visible file, but it keeps the data in an invisible trash bin. So if you just delete pictures and retake them, that invisible trash bin can definitely fill up. It can cause problems, it can cause a virus, and it can actually eat away at new images. This is a very common issue and people don't realize that it's because they aren't formatting their card. Now, I'm not saying you should format your card after every single time you use it. I'm just saying that after you do, you fill it up, it gets full, you do a big event, you go on vacation, and you backed up your photos, format your card every now and then. It'll help it keep it a healthy card. It'll help it last much, much longer, and you won't have to worry about it as much. Through the function settings as well, you can change your LCD brightness. You can change the time and date. You can change the language in case you really want to challenge yourself off of English. You have your GPS device settings. You can enable the beep. So when you push halfway down on the picture taking button and it beeps, that just means that it's in focus. It's a nice confirmation. If you don't want it to beep, you want it to be as silent as possible, you can turn that off. You can do a sensor cleaning, which is essentially just kind of knocking dust off of the sensor in camera. Now, in a situation where it's automatic sensor cleaning, which all it does is it shakes that sensor a little bit, sees if it can knock off the dust. In a situation where you're taking pictures and you start seeing black dots, you may need to go and have the sensor of your camera cleaned professionally. That will require them to remove the lens, open up the mirror and the shutter, clean it with a very special cleaning solution and swabs in order to make sure it gets nice and clean. Now, this isn't something that we recommend for just anybody to do because, like I said earlier in the video, your sensor is going to be the heart of your camera. If you damage it, the camera's gone. So I recommend just taking it to a professional to have it cleaned if you're seeing black spots. If you're not seeing black spots, don't worry about it. Getting back into the menu here, let's see. So you have your custom functions, which you can change certain buttons on your camera. You can clear settings in case things got a little out of control, your camera's doing something funny. This will allow you to kind of reset it back to how you purchased it, factory settings. You have your copyright information. You also have your version of firmware. Now, cameras are so advanced today that they're computers inside a camera. So just like your phone needs to update, just like your computer needs to update its software, occasionally Canon will bring out a firmware update for your camera to update it on new technology, update it on new advancements and what it can do, new features to a limit. But it can help, so just keep an eye out for new firmware and see if it's something that you indeed need. And then of course, the last one here is going to be your display level settings. So this will allow you to actually change, if we take a look here, from our guided version, which is how it is taken out of the box, to a standard where it's just displaying information on the picture, all of our different settings, shutter speed, aperture, whatever it may be, is going to be displayed right there on the rear. So while you're still learning, guided is perfectly fine. Standard might be a little bit easier as you start learning about all those numbers. But other than that, that pretty much sums up the T7 and T7i. Like I said, they're going to be very similar outlay when it comes to the doors, the buttons, the features, and the menu. It's just a little bit different when it comes to those features inside and what it can offer you. Thank you for taking the time to watch my walkthrough of the Canon T7i. I'm aware there's a lot of information, but hopefully it's something to get you started, and this video will be available in case you need a reminder. If you have a specific camera that you would like me to do a walkthrough on, definitely leave a comment below. I have a couple that have already been requested, so I'll get to them as soon as I can. Subscribe, share, and like, and keep your eyes open for inspiration, Shutterbugs. Have a great day.